A few years ago, my sister-in-law, Luke's sister, had a baby, adding a new nephew for Luke and I, and a cousin for my children. It was very exciting for all of us, and we are very close as families. New babies can bring so much joy to a family. And as soon as he was born, I wanted to know his name. So I kept asking Luke to find out what the name was. When he did not, immediately, I decided that the baby's name was going to be Alistair. This was based on no fact or no information or no conversation. I just decided in my head that that is what was going to be his name. It was going to be Alistair. My sister-in-law is married to a Scottish man, and she's English, so I thought that was a good kind of English-Scottish name. And so shockingly, a few days later, we learned that the name was not at all Alistair, the one I had completely invented in my head, but it was Theo. And we very gladly welcomed him into our family. When a new baby is born, the name is often the first question that we ask. And beyond the name itself, we want to know why the name was picked and what it symbolizes for the parents. Picking a name for a child can be stressful for parents. And working with couples with new babies, they voice the weightiness of this decision of picking a name. They want to find the right name for this new life. They want it to be meaningful and even aspirational. They hope that this name will grow with their child throughout its life. When we were expecting our children, I kept telling Luke that I was going to pick the most difficult, the most obscure, the most outdated names that I could possibly find in the Bible to name our children. Clearly, this is not what happened as we picked Julian and Eleanor, but that was a fun game to play as we thought about it. But the names that parents give their children have so much meaning attached to them. It begins to shape their identities and how they walk in the world. We take naming so seriously that we even name pets and cars and plants and computers and many, many things that we can find. But names feature in really important ways in this week's portion, Parashah Vayetze. This portion is filled with very important events. Jacob sees Rachel and falls in love with her. He wants to marry her, and so he agrees to work for her father, Laban. But famously, Laban tricks Jacob, so at his wedding, he ends up by marrying Leah instead. Still in love with Rachel, Jacob agrees to work for Laban for another 7 years until he gets to marry his beloved. Now, this situation has bothered both biblical scholars and readers for millennia. We know that having both sisters married to Jacob and him loving Rachel is a setup for misery for all of them. And Leah so deeply longs for Jacob's affection that she literally embeds her misery into the names of her children. Leah names her first child Reuben, which means, Adonai has seen my plight, and yes, now my husband will love me. Leah's second child she names Shimeon, which means, Adonai has heard that I am despised and has given me this one too. She becomes pregnant again, and this time she names her son Levi, which means, now, this time, my husband will be attached to me. So we feel her heartache and her pain and her misery with each of these names. We can't imagine what it is like for her on a daily basis. What it is like for her to see her husband love her sister more. In addition, she is described as having weak eyes. While there are numerous interpretations of what that really means, it is hard to read that as a compliment, especially in comparison to her sister Rachel, which is supposed to be beautiful and shapely. But however weak Leah might be viewed, she is also empowered and strong as well. She is one of the only biblical women who actually have the ability to name her children, and those names are recorded. It is even suggested that she is the first woman who prays directly to God, and God notices her suffering. So if I could ask Leah a question, I would want to know, why did she pick those names? Why did she embed her own suffering into the names of her children? What was she hoping to accomplish with these names? Or was she just simply too blinded by her own pain that giving them these names was the only way that she could move forward? And I wonder, too, how these names will impact her children and the generations that follow. We know that sibling rivalry continues to be a focus of the book of Genesis, each generation passing sibling rivalry and familial dysfunction to the next. Sibling rivalry reaches new heights with Jacob's children, particularly between Joseph and his brothers. But we also know that the story of Joseph and the book of Genesis gives us hope because it ends on a note of reconciliation and family connection. And I think Leah plays a role in creating this hope, even though the reconciliation takes a long time to come. Because Leah's last son is named Judah, which means, this time I give thanks to Adonai. So even with her pain and even with her misery, Leah still found things to give thanks to God for. She wanted to pass on a sense of optimism and appreciation down to her children as well, and she does so with Judah's name. And we don't know exactly what changed for Leah between the naming of her first 3 children and the last one. But we know that Judah's name is not based on pessimism or pain, but appreciation and gratitude and love. The importance of names is found throughout the text and in our lives as well. In Kohelet Rabbah, we find this idea about the importance of names. It reads, everyone has 3 names. One is the name that they're called by their parents, one by the people who know them, and one name they acquire for themselves. So whether we are given names that highlight a love that is longed for, or a name that is based on gratitude, we each have the opportunity to choose how we embody these names and how we earn a name for ourselves. In his book, Clayton M. Christensen, a professor at Harvard's Business School, he writes about how the decisions that we make impact the names that we acquire for ourselves. He wrote, in life, like in business, we each have limited resources, time, energy, talent, and wealth. And with every moment of our time, every decision about how we spend our energy and our talent and our money, we are making a statement about what is really important to us and who we really want to be. So like all of us, Leah's children have decisions to make about how they want to live their lives. We know that they don't always make the right choices. They can either use the sentiment behind their names to further family dysfunction, or they can try to mend relationships and focus on gratitude. And we know that throughout the book of Genesis, they do both. And truthfully, if we think about it, if we think about our lives, we probably do too. Sometimes we make decisions that live up to the names that we are given, and sometimes we probably don't. But given the importance of names in this week's parashah, our text is urging us to ask ourselves questions about our names. How are we using our names and the ideas behind them to connect with each other? And perhaps most importantly, how are we acquiring a name for ourselves? It is teaching us that we can make changes in our lives, that we can find new paths of connections, and we can focus on gratitude. On acquiring names for ourselves, Rabbi Moskowitz writes, in truth, it is not a journey that we take only in our formative years as teens or as young professionals. It is a journey of values, making tough choices and actions that we take time and time again. We are on a journey right now, all of us, as we strive to earn the name that we want for ourselves, as in the decisions we make about how we live our lives. So I am enjoying watching Theo grow up and grow into the name that he is given. But even more importantly, I am looking forward to seeing the name that he is going to acquire for himself. So as we think about our names and our lives and our personal journeys, I hope that we can be like Leah, naming her last child, focusing on gratitude and connection and healing. I hope that we can live up to the aspiration of the names that we are given. and throughout our actions and the way that we live our lives, I hope we can earn a name for ourselves that we are proud of, and that one that we want to pass on to future generations. May we be blessed as we head into 2025 together, appreciating the good around us, finding connections to one another, and acquiring meaningful and good names for ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.